and I would be covered head to toe in concrete and dyes and everything, and have to make a run into the bank, and all my former employees at the bank would see me and they're like, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?"
Well, hi, this is Steven with the Digital Hustle Show with Burkhart Creative Agency, and I'm super excited to bring to you Jeff Heggie today. He brings a lot of experience building businesses, both in the manufacturing space, the distribution space, and life coaching, writing books. We've done it all. So I'd love to hear kind of just a little bit about your story, about like how you started, and just kind of just a big picture view of kind of your journey.
Sure, thank you. Appreciate you having me here. Um, since I was a kid, I always wanted to do my own thing, had my own little ventures. I liked the entrepreneurship thing. And I actually, in school, that was my major, was entrepreneurship, and absolutely loved it. My hardest part in school was staying in it. I mean, I rodeoed professionally, and I'd get to the end of the semester and my brother would give me a call and say, "Hey, do you want to go to Texas this winter and rodeo?" And there was my next semester of school. It wasn't happening. And so
Right.
but I finally got focused and got in a business program and with the entrepreneurship major, and absolutely loved it. And while I was doing that, I was working in a bank, and again, the rodeo came into play there, because when I finished my schooling, the bank offered me a full-time position, and I turned it down saying, "No, I'm going to go rodeo."
Right.
And but through the course of the next 6 months or so, I was doing the rodeo, I was doing everything, it was going great, but I was also had a kid on the way and started thinking, hey, maybe I need to start growing up a little bit and taking life a little more serious. Ended up taking the job at the bank. Luckily, they still had it there for me.
Yeah.
And loved the banking industry, and went from starting out as doing personal loans and those sort of things to going up the ladder, getting into the position of a bank manager. And what I loved there was I also was in charge of doing all the business loans. And so I had the opportunity to really spend a lot of time with business owners, learning about what they were doing right, what they were doing wrong,
Yeah.
and really seeing the business side of a lot of things. And I always had an itch to be doing my own thing. Even while I was at the bank, I started getting into real estate. I owned some apartment, a mini storage facility, stuff like that.
Okay.
And I had a client that was an entrepreneur that had some really cool companies. And one of the companies he had at the time was a manufactured log home company. And he would build these log homes in a factory, and then they'd ship them all over North America and put them up, and it was really cool. And so I learned a lot from him, just because I loved spending time with him, hearing his stories. He had so many different companies that he had done really cool things with. And one time he knew I had a desire to get out and do something on my own. And one time I was sitting in his office, and he had a stone catalog on his desk. And he says, we put a lot of this stone on our log homes. That'd be really cool if you could figure that out.
Right.
And that was a turning point in my life, because I started doing a little bit of research, and I said, yeah, let's do this. And so he actually ended up being my partner, and still is today. And I found a place in Missouri that taught me how to make manufactured stone. It's the stone veneer. It's like the artificial brick that you see here, that you see on the front of houses, see on fireplaces, stuff like that. And I mean, it's been a long road since then. This was 2005, and the company's pivoted. We've gone different directions in a lot of ways that we can talk about. But yeah, that's kind of how we got into that. And then the coaching part of it is something else that's evolved through that process.
Right. As a byproduct, really, of your experience building businesses, like, for real.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when it came to moving up in the bank job that you had, what do you think was like the skill set that you had or were developing that helped you like climb that ladder, if that makes sense?
I think a lot of it was people skills, relationship skills,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it doesn't matter what you're in. That's probably one of the most important aspects is the people skills. And I really liked the people I was working with. I had a really great boss that was there to give me opportunities.
That's awesome.
I remember one day sitting in my office thinking, I want to take this to the next level. I was doing personal loans, mortgages, mutual fund investments, those sort of things. And I called him and just said, hey, Rob, sometime could we talk about my career path? And he lived in a community about an hour away, and he was in my office that afternoon. And he says, what are you thinking? And so I told him what I wanted to do. And within the next few days, we kind of had it mapped out what had to happen to do it. And he was really a great support for me to make that happen, from going into the different training to getting to where I could be managing my own branch.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. It's cool that you it wasn't just hard work that got you where it was. It was also taking the initiative and being able to have people that supported you and taking opportunities. And that's, some people only chop things up to hard work, and some people are only few people are really successful say it's luck, but certainly it wasn't lucky that you had someone who supported you. Yes, but it wasn't luck that made you ask for help and ask to take things to the next level. You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
You have that desire to continue to grow, which is probably why you ended up eventually transitioning into your manufacturing business.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is, there's so many times, whether you're in your position as an employee, or even I witnessed this when I started Kodiak Mountain Stone, is that when I got out there doing sales, it's hard to ask sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But it gets to the point that you've just got to have the courage to ask, and that can make all the difference in the world, because if you don't ask, it's not going to happen.
That's true. That's true. I mean, heck, this interview happened because we talked and I asked, and here we are. So, so with Kodiak, you basically started and you really had no experience in the industry leading up to that, right?
Right.
So, did you jump right in, or was there a transition period between you leaving the bank and starting at Kodiak? Kind of navigate us through that transition.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of companies you hear started up, someone was doing something in the industry and they kind of evolved and started their thing. I had nothing to do with the manufactured stone or the masonry industry at all.
Right.
So that was a little different. But again, it went back to having a really great support team at the bank, because I just decided to jump right in.
Okay.
And so I went to my boss and told him what my plans were.
Mm-hmm.
And
is this the same boss that gave you the opportunity to move up? Or?
It was they worked together. So Rob,
Okay.
that I was talking to you about, he was considered the so I had a regional vice president, and then Rob was the one right under him. I had to go to the regional vice president, which was Rob's boss, and talk to him. And that's always a scary thing to go.
Yes.
Tell him that I'm going to make some changes, and I'm going to quit this job with all these benefits, and I'm going to go make rocks.
Yeah. Well, when you say it like that, yeah, that's it does sound a little sketchy. Yeah.
But it was awesome. I mean, he basically said, I knew at some point you would do something like this, and if you ever need a job here at the bank, it's here.
That's awesome.
And with that security behind me, that gave me so much more confidence. Thinking, if I go out here and fall on my face, there is a backup plan. But no, I did. I gave my notice and jumped right in, and it was awesome.
That's cool. So you're starting from zero. Granted, you have you partnered with your buddy to be able to grow that business in coordination with the log manufacturing, right? So what was kind of like we kind of talked before on the phone about kind of just talking a little bit about scaling employees and stuff like that. So I'm assuming right at the beginning it was just you and your partner, right? So take us through how that was just kind of getting that built up and like hiring your first employee.
So it was, the original intent was we were going to get this company going. I found someone in Missouri to train me how to do it. And our original plan was to sell a bunch of stone to this log home company. I go down to Missouri, learn everything, and I remember on my flight home thinking, this is snap. This is so easy. This is no problem. And I get home and, you know, we had to get everything put together in the factory and stuff. And once we did, I was so excited because I thought, you know, this first stone I'm going to make, I'm going to keep forever. It's going to be the first Kodiak Mountain Stone product, and it'll be on my shelf or whatever. And I had this specific color that I wanted because I knew it'd be a really popular color. And so that was the first thing we manufactured. And we went the next day to take them out of the molds, and it was a real pretty brown is what we were making. And this thing was pink.
Oh no.
And that stone is still somewhere out in the middle of a field as far as I could throw it from the factory door. And so what I learned there was it was a lot steeper learning curve than what I expected. Employee wise, my partner, he didn't get involved in the manufacturing and that part of the business. He was a great advisor on the business side of things, but actually one of my first employees was his son.
Oh, okay.
He was actually still in high school at the time, but he was able to work part-time, and it was actually his son and a few of his friends, and it just worked really well with how the manufacturing was working just to get started and stuff. And I had another guy that was working with me full-time, and so it was a slow growth because that's how we had to learn it, or else we were just going to be making a whole bunch of rock that was pink. And so
totally.
So it worked really well that way. But the other part was the plan of making all this stone and selling it to this log home company didn't really come together. We sold them a little bit of stone, but we ended up finding a distributor that was close to us that became our first distributor, and they were selling it to home builders, and it kind of just flourished from there. And we did sell some to the log home company, but the way that they did their sales and everything, we couldn't put it on at the factory and ship it, and so it had to go, you know, with the product and then be put on later, and it just ended up not being a great fit. So it got us into the business, but it really wasn't a big part of our business.
Are you trying to tell me that there's hurdles you have to overcome when you're building a business?
so many, and there still are. There's hurdles within Kodiak Mountain Stone every day now that we still face. And I mean, the thing about it is, it's just like anything in business or in life, that you face a hurdle that can feel like the end or the biggest hurdle you face. But once you figure out how to get through it and persevere, the next time you face it, it's that much easier. And so it does become easier and easier as you're doing it. And the next time you've got a hurdle that you think is going to be the end of the world, you can reflect on how you got through the other ones, and it's doable.
So you kind of have like this ragtag team of people getting started out, right? A bunch of high schoolers, which by most people's standards would just eye roll at the thought of that actually helping build a business, but clearly it worked out for you, right? So at least on the short term. So how like, walk us through a little bit, like, did you spend a lot of time like really trying to impart some sort of like work culture with them, or like what was kind of your development process with both your full-time guy and the high school kids?
So in the beginning, like with any startup, you're pretty much filling every role. And so I was spending a lot of time in the factory working with these younger guys. And you know, I would be covered head to toe in concrete and dyes and everything, and you know, have to make a run into the bank, and all my former employees at the bank would see me and they're like, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" But yeah, it actually worked really well, because even though they were younger high school kids, they ended up being better workers than some of the full-time guys I got down the road. They were really solid. they just were a unique group of kids that was really solid. And they just worked hard. And I ended up hiring another guy that kind of came in as team leader.
Okay.
And he was a good manager. He did some good things. I was trying, I was in the factory. I was trying to do sales. I was doing everything. And there was a point that I did hire a guy that his job was to get out there and, build a dealer network.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it didn't work so well. And so I actually put my faith in the guys in the factory and said, okay, you guys have to take this on now because I've got to get out there and do the sales.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I took on. And, so this was in 2005. By January of 2006, we had opened another factory in Utah. So this was in Canada.
Okay,
And so the second factory was in Utah. And it wasn't a very long period between the first and the second opening, but we learned a lot. Everything I started the factory in Canada was how I learned it. And there's a lot of manual things that in Utah we were able to put systems and things in place that made it a lot easier, put a batch plant in and stuff. And I got really lucky down there, hired some great people that ended up being great leaders for us down there.
Yeah.
And so I ended up spending a lot of time going back and forth between Utah and Canada, especially during that startup time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was trying to build the culture of, having pride in what we were building.
Yeah.
Because the hard part was here these guys were in a dirty factory all day making this stone and not realizing what the end product really was turning out to be.
Yeah.
They saw it, of course, but
Yeah.
not as much on the buildings and stuff like that. And so one of the things that I did was we started putting a lot of pictures up in the factories showing, this beautiful home that's got our stone on it, and also getting guys out and seeing projects so that they started to see what the end product looked like.
Right.
That, it's starting as a bunch of concrete here, but it ends up on a multi-million-dollar home and looks beautiful.
Right.
So they started really taking some pride in what they were doing then.
Yeah, I would imagine. I don't know, your involvement on the post end of things, but there's something exciting about seeing the light in a customer's eye when something comes together that they're really excited about. And so being able to have that experience is something that you got to have, but not everyone else, which is really cool. Exactly. That you were able to share that with them, because certainly, it only becomes more and more true with, the younger generations coming up is having purpose in what they're doing is so huge. You know what I mean? To be able to give them that you're not just pouring concrete. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're making people super happy, super pumped. What you're creating is beautiful and amazing. That's got to feel good. Yeah. Way more than just good job today. You poured, 10 gallons, or 1,000 gallons. Clearly I don't manufacture stone, so I don't know how much is a lot, but you know what I mean? That's cool that you were able to really encourage them and develop your team that way.
Well, something even last night that was really cool, and I hope that my team sees this, was I was on Facebook and I saw someone share a link to a bed and breakfast because it was an amazing place. It's a castle.
Oh, wow.
And as soon as I saw it, I hadn't even read any of the content or anything. I looked at it, I'm like, oh, that's Charles' house. I knew who it was because it was our product on it.
Oh, awesome.
And so then I obviously got into it and read it and stuff. Yeah. And yeah, it's this guy built himself a castle.
That is so cool.
It is so cool. And just knowing, hey, we made all that stone, because there's not an inch on the exterior of that house that isn't stone.
That's amazing.
And it just looks like a big castle. It's up in central Alberta, and it's really cool.
I say, really, to get a castle, you got to go to Spain or something like that, and that's
Spain or central Alberta.
That's a little far for me, but yes, certainly you could just build your own castle.
Yeah.
So you talked about how, at least when we talked earlier, you talked about how you transitioned from manufacturing to more distribution, right? You felt like that was a great transition. Now, I would venture to say that a lot of people really have a lot of challenges with transitions, whether it's maybe being like a little stuck on what they're doing, or having too much pride and like, oh, like, no, this is what I do, or just not even seeing the signs that it's time to transition. But you did. And so walk us through a little bit about like what were some of the kind of the signs that you were seeing, and how do you think you successfully made that switch?
Sure. I actually, it's kind of unique with Kodiak. We've had to transition a number of times. But just talking about that change, the first part was right in the beginning when, I talked about I was doing everything.
Yeah.
I was doing the sales, I was taking the POs, I was fulfilling POs and, handling everything. And it got to the point that I obviously needed someone else helping me on that, but it was really hard to let go.
Yeah.
Thinking, well, can I really train them to do it right? Are they going to do a good job? That sort of thing.
Are they going to care as much as you do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I really had a hard time with that delegation and just letting go. And the nice thing was we brought some people in, and I was able to do some of that delegation. And of course it was like, not sure if I was going to do it or not.
Yeah.
And the cool part was they did it better than I had ever done it. And so and that was a confidence booster for me and a lesson learned that, if you bring the right people together and put a team together, that you've got to be able to have confidence in them, and they'll do their job. And so that helped me a lot. But then, so originally we were focused on the Southern Alberta market. Then we opened in Utah, and we really wanted to get expanded in the US. And so we were doing a lot of things, and we were getting all over the place, and it was doing really good. And then all of a sudden 2008 happened, and that was rough, and it really set us back, and we ended up having to pivot the company at that point, and we pulled out of the US a lot on what we were doing and kind of put our focus right back there at home. I was living in Canada, and it really made us reevaluate how we were doing things. And one of the things that we did at that time was we decided to go from being strictly a manufacturer to also a distributor. So we opened some of our own stores.
Right.
And when we did that, obviously we had the product, we wanted to sell it, but my thought was, if a customer walks in here and decides they don't want our product, I don't want them walking out. Yeah. So I had to look at what else we were going to do. And so then we brought in natural stone, we brought in brick, we brought in acrylic stucco, started bringing in those things. But then I also started looking at, well, what if they want manufactured stone and ours isn't a good fit for them?
Right.
So then I also went to some of our competitors and said, we want to distribute your product.
Yeah. And,
that kind of raised some eyebrows at the beginning. Like,
sure.
Okay, you're our competitor. Why are you talking to us about selling our product?
Yeah.
But we ended up being able to put some deals together, and it actually ended up working really well. And so through time, that's kind of what we've done is we had our product, we had some of our competitors' products, and then the other products like the natural stone, the brick, and those sort of things. And still, winter was our hard part because, there's not a lot of stone that goes on during the winter in Canada.
Yeah, I imagine the construction slows down a bit.
So that was always our struggle because, our factory was still in Utah. By this time, actually, we had moved all our production to Utah, and it was hard because once winter hit, our sales would slow down, but our overheads were still there.
Yeah.
And so actually in December of 17, we took another look at things and decided, we've got to the point that we've got to decide what we're really doing and what our strengths are. And we'd been working with these what I considered our competitors.
Yeah.
And really made us look at things and realize, if you go by what Jim Collins talks about and what can you be the best in the world at, or even what can you be the best in your industry at.
Right.
And we were never going to be the manufacturers that these big guys were. They were mammoth compared to what we were.
Right.
There was a lot of benefits that we had doing our own manufacturing, because we were small enough that we could shift and move quickly on things, but there was a lot of things that we couldn't do that the big guys could. Right. Number one, economies of scale.
Sure.
And so as we look at things and realize that, it's costing us to produce for pretty close to what it's costing us to buy from these big guys, why are we producing ourselves?
Right.
And so it took a lot of time to really figure out what we were going to do, but we did decide to get out of the manufacturing and focus solely on distribution.
Right.
And I think, I know it's been a good decision. It was a tough decision to make because from 2005 to 2017, that's what we were.
Yeah.
But it was the right thing to do with where we were at, and it's been a good move.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's transitions are hard, and thankfully you guys are able to navigate that well and make that change and adjustment and be willing to set down something that defined you guys for so long, with the manufacturing.
Yeah.
So just to kind of wrap up like that part of what you do, like how do you see the company 5 years from now? Like, what does that look like for you guys?
So we're actually, the reason I live here in Arizona now is because of Kodiak Mountain Stone and winter.
Yes.
Because obviously there's a better winter market for us here than there is in a lot of the other places that we are. And we've done a number of things to get back into the US market a little more, and it's been good, but not in a big way. And so wanting to get back into the market, this is the right place to do it. And there are a lot of great things happening in Arizona. And we've got a lot of great contacts here, and we really think we're going to be able to have a big impact here, doing some good things. We're just in the middle of some deals right now to get a few things set up, and once that does all come together, I think we're going to be able to have a big presence here in Arizona, as well as have this as a distribution point to get to a lot of our customers that we've dealt with in the past that we haven't so much now, just because we haven't had such a big presence here.
Right.
And so I really think over the next 5 years, we'll see a lot of growth of Kodiak Mountain Stone, starting here in Arizona, but growing out from there.
Yeah. The amount of people moving here is just crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I've heard everything like 200 a day last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I would not be surprised. So I've lived here my whole life, and things are always expanding out. People got to move somewhere. You always hear like, oh, like so many people are moving here, blah blah blah, and you don't always see it, especially when you live in the middle of Phoenix, because like there's only so much more housing you can put in the middle of the city, right outside of high rises. So doing some of the AV work that I did, I started going out to the west side, out in the Verrado area, Buckeye, Goodyear, and it's just like, oh my gosh, where did all this come from? There's like 1 million homes here, and it's like, oh, that's where everyone's going. And it's crazy to think that not even 10 years ago, you could get past like 180th Avenue and there'd be nothing there, and like now it's like full on retirement communities, like new homes, new families, and it's just like, it's wild.
No, it has been impressive to watch.
So let's go and transition now to, so you've had all this business experience, you've hired people, you've transitioned companies, all this other jazz. Now you've decided to get into business coaching and helping people out, right? Did that kind of happen organically? Did people just start reaching out to you for advice, or is this something you've kind of like intentionally decided to build and really like, not necessarily give back, but maybe, but just kind of have this experience that you now have to be able to actually leverage and give people real advice, as opposed to people that are just giving advice? And like, how's that happen for you?
It's kind of been a little bit of both, because I have had, throughout the years, even in the early years of running Kodiak, I've had people come to me talking to me about business advice and helping them work through some things. And also because it's something that I've always had a desire to do. And Dave, my CFO, that one of my partners, I've talked to him a lot about it. And I guess a lot of it too is the fact that I know throughout my business career, I've made a lot of mistakes. Made mistakes that, maybe it was I misjudged something, or it was just something that I thought was going to go great and it didn't.
Yeah.
But we've learned a lot of lessons doing it. And Dave and I have talked about that a lot, just talking about, we've got so much experience that we can help people.
Yeah.
And not that everyone needs help knowing what mistakes not to make in manufacturing or whatever, but just in business in general. But after being in business this long, being in banking, I've got a diverse background and had a lot of experience that I enjoy sharing. And so it was actually one day that Dave talked to me and said, you've always talked about wanting to get into coaching. Mm-hmm. He says, and so Dave actually, he was with me full-time as a CFO, and just an incredible guy that can put systems into places in a company that does amazing things. And he basically did it with our company to a point that he worked himself out of a full-time job.
Right. Which is what you're kind of supposed to do, but like,
he did an awesome job.
Yeah.
And so what he realized is it was a talent that he had. And so he created his own company that he was basically a part-time CFO for a number of companies. And he's done exceptional with that. And so he told me, he says, I've got a client that is a coach that I think you should meet and talk to. And so I had the opportunity to sit down with him. And one of the things he says, then, why aren't you doing it?
Yeah.
And just got me thinking and thought, this is an opportunity that I really could help some people and do something that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And so I've intentionally put more effort into it in the last year or so, and have really enjoyed it. It's something, just like I talked about back when I was in banking, being able to sit down with a client and go through their business and help them make some changes or whatever. Kind of the same thing now, just with a lot more experience behind me now.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's so awesome. I mean, like, you don't have to open up Instagram for like 30 seconds to find like a bunch of 20-year-olds giving like life and business advice. And so it's nice to know. And I think that's probably why I wanted to spend as much time as I did talking about kind of the history of Kodiak, because it's like you really have done a lot. You've been around for a while. You've like had a lot of experiences, both good and bad, as you said. And certainly bad experiences are only bad if you don't learn from them, and you have, right? Obviously, you're, you wouldn't be here today, coaching people about it, you know what I mean? So that's really neat that you have that to draw on and have like legit experience to share. You made a comment earlier when you were talking about when you got into banking and you learned a lot of the mistakes that business owners were making and helping them out, just even back then.
Yeah.
Did you find that there was like some common threads of the like things that business owners dealt with that like was a challenge for them, or like was there any commonalities at all?
I think back then, a lot of it, at least what I was dealing with, I was in Southern Alberta, small communities, and a lot of what I saw was people not really understanding how to market and the things they needed to do to market their business properly without spending a ton of money.
Right.
And that's something I still deal with today as a coach.
Yeah. So, I mean, are you comfortable with being specific? Like what kind of thing, like, so you say they had trouble marketing, like, did they not understand their market? Did they just not know how to like put stuff out there that got seen and recognized and was, engaging, or like what kind of issues did they have?
Back then, a lot of it was not understanding who their target market was, who they should be marketing to, and how they should be doing it. Now, what I see a lot is, I guess one of the biggest things is most businesses now have a website, and there's a lot of people I work with that they've got their website, they spend a ton of money on it, and they haven't even looked at it in 5 years.
Yeah.
And a website is such a powerful tool if you use it right. But if a customer comes to it and he's not someone that's going to buy from you right now, what are you doing to make sure that you're still going to stay in their orbit, so that if when they do become a now buyer, they're still going to be thinking of you.
Right.
And so there's a lot of things you can do on their websites to make sure that you're keeping those people close to you until it comes time for them to become a client. That's probably one of the biggest examples that I see over and over, is utilizing the websites properly and things that they can do that it's not going to take a bunch of money, and they can really take advantage of it.
Yeah, and even just doing a little bit of research that I did on you before you showed up, like you totally practice what you preach on the website, because like I was just flipping through your blog, and it's like you're posting like at least once a week is what it looks like not just like an idea or a little thought, like they're like full on blog posts. They're like huge, which I'm imagining is great for SEO. And just super helpful stuff. Like everything you put on is like super helpful, in depth, like knowledgeable. It's not just like you're just throwing something out there to throw it out there, which I thought was really cool.
Well, thanks. I've admired the books you've got on your shelf here, and that's one thing I've really, since actually going back to the banking when I talked about Rob, he's the one that got me into reading.
Okay.
And so I've always been into self-development and stuff like that, and I try to take courses a lot and different things. And Russell Brunson, who owns ClickFunnels,
yes, okay.
I was taking one of his courses a while ago, and Steve Larson, who's one of the instructors, one of the things he says is you've got to start publishing. You've got to start publishing, whether it's Facebook Live, whether it's a blog post, whatever it is. And yeah, that wasn't something I was comfortable with.
Sure.
And one of the things that kind of got me going ahead with it was, he says, you know what, the fact is, you start now, no one's going to be reading it anyways.
That's so true.
He says, start publishing, get in the habit. You're going to get better at it. You're going to be able to put better content together. And you'll look back at your first ones and think, what was I doing? But
Right.
It really is. It's something I've tried to make sure that I put something once a week.
Yeah.
And it's been good, not only to be able to put that content out there, but it's something that, to put something good out there, it requires some thought and effort. And so it makes me spend some time thinking about whatever that topic is I'm going to write about. And so, it's hopefully people are getting good stuff out of it, but it's been good for me too, because, and usually what it is, it's something that I've been dealing with a client and they're dealing with an issue. And so it's something that's really on my mind, and I've been trying to think about it and put some effort into it. And then I'll try to put something together to write about it.
That's cool. Yeah, it's the nice thing is too, the more you make, the more it buries that crap that you made at the very beginning. It's like literally you can't find it, because that's like 100 blog posts deep. You know what I mean? Like after a year, you've got 52 posts, and then that way hopefully no one ever finds that terrible beginning one. That's really cool. What other things are you doing? So you're doing the blog posts, which are awesome. What other kind of things are working for you as far as like marketing that you've really seen like positive results from?
So I do the blog posts. I've got a weekly, I call it my Inner Circle Mastermind, and I've got some great members in there. And what I do is I also record that, and because anyone in the mastermind group that doesn't get to watch it, they get to watch the replay or whatever.
Right.
And I'll take clips from that and put them out on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And those seem to get some good replies too, because it's just like the blog posts. Usually the topics that we talk about in the mastermind are things that people are dealing with right now.
Right.
And so they're applicable to usually more than that individual.
Right.
And so they're good that way. And that's been good too, because as people see those, I get more people that are interested in joining the mastermind. And as a mastermind, I think the more people you can have involved in it, that you can give feedback to one another, the better off you're going to be. I look at the power of a mastermind I remember right as I was going through one of the transitions with Kodiak Mountain Stone, I was at a business conference in Hawaii, and I was trying to figure out a few things on how to proceed. And I was sitting with a lady that owned a scrapbooking company. Okay. And she was telling a story about some things that she did in her company when she pivoted. And I thought, it was kind of like the light went off. I'm like, that'll work for me. Yeah. And so the fact that some things that I've done with Kodiak Mountain Stone came from an idea from a scrapbook company.
Who would have thought?
Kind of, yeah, exactly. So it kind of shows the power of a mastermind, and that's what I like about the mastermind is I get people from different industries, different businesses that can give each other feedback. And we've got our private Facebook group that they can give each other feedback on any topics, whether it's something we talked about or not. They can just get on there and say, hey, I'm doing this, does anyone have any thoughts on it?
Right.
So that's been really cool. Then besides that, as I mentioned, I've got my coaching that I do, the one-on-ones. We've got some team coaching, and then I've got a online coaching program as well that I use. I call it our e-learning marketing system, that we use it with the majority of our one-on-one people that we coach, but also I've got people that don't really want to get into the one-on-one coaching, or they can't afford to get into the one-on-one coaching.
Sure.
But the e-learning marketing system is a great tool for them to kind of get the coaching and support they need to go.
And isn't usually team coaching usually a bit more affordable too? Is that kind of like the idea that like, which is super nice. And like, certainly, I mean, as you know, learning from books is really good, and there's always some nugget of information, or hopefully multiple, that you can get from a book. But sometimes you really do need that like very specific advice. Where it's like, no, like I'm literally trying to do this one thing. I need to know how to do it. And I need someone to look at the numbers and make an assessment, right? Rather than just like hearing like a good idea or like a cool idea or a concept that maybe you get from a book. But certainly I would never think, no offense to scrapbookers, but I would never think to reach out to them for like crazy advice. But you know what I mean? Like
a rock company.
yeah. And so sure enough, it worked out that way.
Yeah.
And it's funny how the little things can create amazing ideas and opportunities. Just doing that. Granted, you had to go to Hawaii to do that.
had to go to Hawaii,
Right. Well, right. Yeah. I'm sure it was a real struggle, but you know what I mean? But I mean, still, you had to take the time out, you had to make the investment, and even just the idea that you were going to seek knowledge and help and all that is just another testament to why you've succeeded the way you've succeeded. So a question for the masterminds. Let's just say someone's like starting up, they're new in the game, right? Because a mastermind, you kind of assume that you have something to offer, right? And so everyone there has something to offer. So maybe someone's newer to the game. What would be your suggestion for them? Would it be to jump in a mastermind and just be like a good listening ear? Or would you suggest more of like the coaching route until someone's built something in which they have more to contribute? Or is contribution really not as a barrier to entry as I think it is?
Not necessarily, not with the masterminds, because there's so many things that happen in the mastermind that, just like a book, it might be a good listen. You might not even say a word during the mastermind. I have a lot of, like, I think I mentioned it, that aren't able to get on the live call, and so they just listen to the replay. And I'll get emails from them saying the value they got out of it and whatnot. But it's going to be, that one time that all of a sudden you have something specific you want to talk about that you can bring up, or someone else brings something up that you think, hey, I never thought of that. That'd work for me too. So really, I don't know. The mastermind is, I think, an excellent tool for people that, if it's very different than the one-on-one coaching, because it doesn't get as specific to your situation and stuff. And I've got, I wouldn't know the percentage or the numbers, but a lot of the people that I do the one-on-one coaching with are actually part of the mastermind as well, which works really well because, they can share a lot of their thoughts and stuff that we've talked about in the one-on-one coaching. But with the masterminds, no, there's not a lot of barriers to that because there's so much knowledge on so many different topics that get shared.
Right. That's awesome. So on a more personal note, maybe you don't want to share, but like I always ask people, like, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Like, what to you is like your driver, like your motivator, that like you like open your eyes and you're like super pumped. Maybe you're not. I don't know. Like some people it's a struggle. Some days more than others. But what do you think gets you, like, what gets you fired up? I guess is a better question. I
think the fact that I know that whether it's something I'm doing with Kodiak or something I'm doing on the coaching side, that, knowing that what we do matters. What I do on a daily basis impacts more than myself in both Kodiak Mountain Stone and in my coaching. And like right now I'm doing things with Kodiak Mountain Stone that when they finally all come together, I'm just so excited about what we have happening. On a daily basis, there's some frustrations in how long things are taking and stuff, but the excitement of putting the deals together, bringing it all together to create something, I guess that's what it is. Being able to create things is what gets me excited. And even on the coaching side, creating outcomes and helping people create their own outcomes. I was on a call with a client last week, and partway during the call, it was just like he had an epiphany from things we had been talking about, and he said something to the fact that that's why I have you helping me, because I need these things to get me through. And those are the things that excite me. Being able to help create.
Yeah, definitely. And I think being someone who does the visual creation with the video, it's always funny to me because I feel like some people think that unless you're making something tangible, whether it's a painting or a video or a photograph or a scrapbook, that somehow that's not creating. But I very much disagree. I think building a business is creating. I think, they say, creating company culture, that is creating. You're taking something that doesn't exist and making it for the very first time, even if it's like, it's still unique to you, even if it's like, obviously lots of people built companies, but each one is unique in the way it functions and feels and operates and what it does. And that's cool that you've found that creativity in making something, even though it's not something tangible per se. Well, I mean, I guess you're manufacturing there, but it's just really cool.
That's even, I coach high school basketball as well. And it's the same thing, that when you're working with a player and you can see some potential that they have in them and they're not there, but when they all of a sudden click and they can figure it out and you've helped them get to that next level, it's rewarding.
Yeah, totally. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your story and everything else with us. Hopefully, I'm sure that someone will benefit from this. And I know I certainly did. I enjoyed it. And hope you enjoyed telling your story and sharing that information with people. So thank you so much. And thank you guys for watching and for seeing the Digital Hustle Show. And be sure to comment or share and send emails or whatever and get a hold of us. If you could share, what is a couple good ways for people to get a hold of you?
Absolutely. So can I share a few websites?
Oh, absolutely.
So Kodiak Mountain Stone is kodiakmountain.com. Then for myself, it's JeffHeggie, JeffHeggie.com. That's where my blog is and a lot of my information. You can find out about the mastermind there. And then JeffHeggieBusiness.com as well is where a lot of my coaching information is.
And you have links on, at least I know of JeffHeggie.com, that you have like your book, your ebook, right? That you're giving away. So that's like that would be really cool resource. That one was called Finding $10,000 in Any Business in 45 Minutes or something like that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's a book of just some of the marketing strategies I use in my coaching. And if you go to JeffHeggie.com, there's a link there that you can get that. It's a free download. And also, I guess I'm on all social media, but probably the one I'm most active on is Instagram. And that's actually Entrepreneur Next Door. Or if you just search Jeff Heggie, that'll come up as well.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Appreciate it.